It is fabulous to see all of your faces this morning, and I'm so glad that you've joined our very first virtual annual meeting. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Sherry Pirazzoli, and I'm currently serving as the interim president of HLAA Washington. So let's get started with our agenda today. We're going to start with our board update and introductions. First, we'd like to start with to acknowledge our significant service of these three individuals. As you know, Cynthia, Larry, and Warren each have a long history with HLAA. All three started as board trustees and then moved into leadership roles. Cynthia served as our board secretary and then in 2019 became president. Larry served as vice president for a year and a half, and Warren has really been a true champion. He served as past president of HLAA, the editor of our Sound Waves newsletter, and for the past 2 years has been our board secretary. Cynthia and Larry left the board of trustees this past spring, and Warren is wrapping up his tenure at the end of this year. Not surprisingly, each of these folks remains dedicated to service and improving the lives of those of us living with hearing loss. Cynthia is leading up the Tacoma Pierce County League of Women Voters. Larry is president of the Whatcom County HLAA chapter, and Warren serves on the Governor's Commission for Disability Employment and is a member of the ODHH Resource Council. Please join me in giving a quick round of applause to our devoted and gifted members. Thank you so much for your service. And so now on to your current board of trustees. We will introduce ourselves and share a little bit about why we have and why we have served and why we continue to serve. For my part, I think back to Rocky Stone, Self-Help for Hard of Hearing, and HLAA. And HLAA really became a lifeline for me when I was diagnosed with severe and progressive hearing loss in my late 20s. I became a member of HLAA in 1983. And I'm very honored to serve on the board of directors. In 2011, I joined the HLAA Washington Board of Trustees, and Karen made me the director of advocacy. And now I'm serving as interim president as we build up the organization. During all of this time, I founded Let's Loop Washington to advocate for hearing loops and hearing access in public places. I really believe deeply in the value of HLAA. I feel it's so important to keep people connected, to replace isolation with hope and community, and to replace fear with communication technologies and solutions and strategies. Personally, I've benefited from HLAA and I work to pay it forward. Warren?
Thanks, Sherry. I'm Warren Weissman. As Sherry mentioned, I am currently the secretary of the board. I joined HLAA in 2013. I'd had unilateral hearing loss, no hearing on one side for 30 or 40 years. But after my hearing on the other side deteriorated to its current level in 2012, I started looking into resources, and I joined HLA after moving to Seattle in 2013. I joined by going to a what was then the Seattle chapter meeting that Karen Utter was managing, and quickly started learning a lot about hearing loss. Over the years, as Sherry said, I've had various roles with the organization. But I think the most important thing for me has been the simple benefit of learning from people like Karen and Sherry and so many others about their experiences, learned a lot about technology. My role as editor of Sound Waves has meant that I've had the opportunity to interact with a whole bunch of people that have written articles for the newsletter and learn from those people and from their experiences and their knowledge. I think that's probably enough for me to say.
Okay, so so next we would have Bill, and Bill, are you on the call?
I'm here. Actually, you're looking at an older version of Warren Weisman up there at the top of the screen. You see what you're going to look like, Warren? My name is Bill Collison, and I'm thankful to be a part of this group. I first learned about hearing loss in my audiologist office when I picked up a flyer, and the meeting was held just 2 blocks away. 2 nights later, my wife and I were there, and it was a wonderful epiphany for both of us. It was a great support group, and I'd never heard that there was a support group, and yet I lost my hearing probably close to the time that Rocky Stone started his chapter. Now, that was in the second era that was affected by hearing loss. The other one was 50 years before that. We have many friends and are grateful to be a part of this organization in an effort to educate the hearing impaired. But that also includes government officials, physicians, pastors, and families. The most important thing that I impart to my physicians, and I've seen many of them in the last several months, is speak slower and look at me. And I would suggest that you emphasize that every time you go into a doctor's office, even with their assistants. There you go. That's all I know.
Thank you, Bill. And now let's go to Glenda.
Hi, my name is Glenda Filio, and when I was 27, I started experiencing severe vertigo and tinnitus, and the ENT at the time told me that I had Meniere's syndrome and would eventually go deaf. He offered me no hope, no help. I pursued, whatever I could to deal with symptoms and dreaded the day I would go deaf. When I was, about 20 years ago, I woke up and my head felt like it was in a bucket, and I had trouble understanding people. It was very sudden. I thought maybe I had a cold, and I waited a few weeks before I went for an evaluation. And as it turned out, my right ear was dead and my left ear was very bad. Again, no hope, no help. I had small children and I was working, and my life started getting smaller as I struggled to understand what was going on in the car, in the dark. It was just frustration. I decided I needed to get some help, and I noticed that there was a hearing loss chapter meeting near me, and I decided to go. And my very first meeting, I was greeted at the door by a friendly smile and someone who was looking at my lips as close as I was looking at their lips. And I felt right at home. They knew what I was going through. And the very first speaker talked to us about pocket talkers and personal FM systems, let us try them at the meeting, and I could hear. It was marvelous, and I needed to know more. I continued going to HLAA meetings, conventions. Reading the magazine was just a joy because I could find other people who were going through similar experiences and had solutions. At my meetings, I met intelligent, accomplished people. So my world didn't have to get smaller. And so through HLAA, I have gone to leadership training. I have gone to multiple conventions in various parts of the country, and I lead a small chapter or support group in Renton, and the one that saved me. and I just can't wait to see what happens as we change with this newer technologies.
Thank you, Glenda. So now let's go to Karen Utter, our HLAA Washington chapter coordinator.
Oh, good morning. It's a delight to be here, and following Glenda, I could almost say that her story is my story. Back about 1990 or a little bit before that, I was deaf in one ear and couldn't hear out of the other, and I was literally at my wit's end. I did not know what to do. And I finally, from a little ad in the newspaper, found a group in Richmond Beach that said they would talk about being hard of hearing. I walked into that group, and they were a lot of older people, but a few people that seemed to be somewhere near my age range. They all had hearing loss, and they talked about it. And I had never, ever been around another person who had a hearing loss that was willing to say anything about it. It was like my world opened up, and I was hooked. And so here I am, 30 years later, I'm still here. I've been active in the community of all people who have disabilities along the way, but beginning with SHHH, I have been a chapter leader, outreach director, chapter coordinator, president, and general all-around handy person, you know, helping anybody that I could. The friendships that I've made along the way have been lifelong, and I'm just delighted because some of those people are here on the call still, and I'm just so happy that we could do something together that was fun and enjoyable and educational to all of us.
Thank you,
Okay,
Karen.
now I move on. We have a missing board member, Sandra Bunning, known as Sandy, who could not be with us today. And so I'm happy to read her information as she shared it. So now I'm Sandy, pretend. I discovered in my mid-40s, I was having a little difficulty hearing in a quiet environment. A new job in a tax accountant's office, very different from the usual noise. Not knowing anything about hearing loss and going to a qualified audiologist, who I later discovered wasn't all that bright. I figured it was up to me to learn all I could. Participating in a bazaar, I met Michael Bauer. She was telling me the procedure and walking away, and I said, Michael, if you want me to hear you, you have to face me. And this is really special. This what came up before. Just looking at the person you're speaking with is important. I'm hard of hearing, she said. That was 1997, and the start for me in SHHH at the Auburn chapter. I wasn't the only person in the world with hearing loss, and I've been working for the cause ever since. Helping to start the chapters, being president of one, board member forever, it seems, serving as correspondence coordinator, proofreader, greeter, and helping with the annual summer picnic. But the most rewarding for me was being on the 2002 local organizing committee for the successful national convention of HLAA held in Seattle, and chairing a successful money-making shopping raffle. No matter where I am, the subject of hearing loss comes up, and I'm right there to help. And so that's our friend Sandy. And thank you all for your support and keeping us going all this time.
Great. Thank you, Karen, and thank you for sharing Sandy's stories. I'd just like to thank all of our Board of Trustees and everyone who has joined our call today. So we are working hard for you. And the first thing that I'd like to do is to let Bill Collison, our treasurer, to give you a brief financial update.
First, as many of you know, HLA at the state level is an all-volunteer organization, and we're really honored to be a part of that. And we're solvent. We don't have any debt, but we also are very appreciative of the donations they've made, because we pay for the captioning and the services that go with meetings just like this, and we're glad to do that. But we're very appreciative of your support that makes this possible.
So thank you very much, Bill. So yes, we are very grateful to each of you for your financial donations and your contributions to HLAA Washington. HLAA Washington shares the same mission as HLAA and the HLAA chapters, and that is to open the world of communication to people with hearing loss by providing advocacy, support, and education. The difference is that HLAA Washington focuses on helping people with hearing loss here in Washington State. And I will add that COVID has made each of our focus areas more critical than ever. There are an estimated 1.5 million people in Washington State living with hearing loss, but only we have one active chapter, and that is our Whatcom County chapter. And we also have one official support group in Renton. As a state association, we help to fill that gap for people with no local chapter. We also provide a bridge to information from HLAA. So before delving into our focus areas, I want to briefly catch you up on HLAA Washington as an organization. This past spring, the Board of Trustees agreed to focus on organizational health and communications. And over the past few months, we have worked with the Washington nonprofit. Mike needs to be muted. So we have worked with the Washington Nonprofit Association to strengthen our organizational health. We have updated and standardized our communication with a focus on sharing HLAA COVID-19 response programming. And we designed this meeting just for you to get your input about the organization and your priorities. The current HLAA Board of Trustees are committed to strengthening HLAA Washington. And with your help, we are hoping to build the board, our volunteer base, and our membership. So I'm going to take the next several minutes to let you know what we've been doing the past year with our focus areas and some opportunities to help you get involved. So next slide on information. So we have been working. So information is critical to living well with hearing loss, and we use several information channels to get the word out. And I would like to thank Joanne Dyer, who spends many hours each month managing our communications. Our website at hearinglosswa.org contains information about activities, managing challenges, advocacy opportunities, and hearing-friendly entertainment, and our archived newsletters, and much more. We have a Twitter and Facebook social media accounts. They're full of timely and helpful posts and give you an opportunity to engage in online discussions. And then only if you are signed up every 2 weeks for our HLAA Washington e-news, it will land in your inbox. You'll get links to resources, articles, and blog posts. You'll get information about maintaining your hearing health, buying hearing aids, and using assistive technologies. We also include listings of hearing-friendly venues and captioned online entertainment. And we also include invitations to virtual meetings just like this one, to webinars, local activities, and advocacy opportunities. So the e-news is your best and easiest way to stay connected and up to date with the latest information, resources, and happenings pertaining to living with hearing loss here in Washington State. So perhaps not surprisingly, our first poll question is, are you receiving the HLAA Washington e-news? So go ahead, don't be shy. Go ahead and give an answer, yes or no.
I'm going to give it a few more seconds and then I'm going to end the poll. And I'm ending it in 3. Oh, quicker than that. Let me show you. Do you want me to share the results, Sherry?
Yes, that would be great.
Okay, so here are the poll results. So most of you are in fact receiving HLAA e-news, which is great.
So yeah, that's just wonderful. And so I would just like to say, we would love to get your feedback. So if you've got ideas for improving the e-news, or if you would like to contribute stories, please email us at info@hearingloss.wa.org. Even now, so next slide, please. So even if you're a member of HLAA, which automatically makes you a member of HLAA Washington, you have to sign up to receive our e-news, and the law frowns upon organizations putting you on a mailing list without your consent. So you have two options. You can click on the link that we'll put in the chat, or you can go to our website to and click the links and follow down through that to sign up for our e-news. So what I'd like to talk about right now is, what about sound waves? Most of you know that Sound Waves has been our multi-page printed newsletter that we distributed at outreach events, health fairs, and we mailed to subscribers, and we gave out to hearing health providers for their office rooms. Digital versions are archived on our website under newsletters. The Board of Trustees made the decision earlier this year to discontinue Sound Waves. The last issue was in fall of 2019. There were several challenges combined to make Sound Waves unsustainable. It was a huge time commitment for our volunteer editor. It was challenging to get content and difficult to get feedback. And then COVID-19 hit, the printer closed, distribution of printed materials was considered a risk of transmission, and our advertisers began to see a decrease in business. So in contrast, our e-news holds several advantages. Because it is digital, we can be nimble with content. Email is basically free, and we can collect data that tells us what stories are important and what's getting the most interest. So all that we want to know is, what do we need to prioritize in producing more traditional Sound Waves publication? So I guess our next question is going to be, how important is it for you to receive a printed version of Sound Waves or a printed version of a newsletter?
So this is Tina. I'm going to let this go for another 30 seconds and then I will show the results again. And here are the results of the poll.
Okay, so this is great. We will later in the year, we hope to do another survey. So this is really important to get this data back from you, and this will help us determine our priorities. So I'm going to move quickly next to advocacy. And when it comes to advocacy, we have two distinct priorities. We have legislative advocacy, working to pass laws that protect and enhance the lives of Washingtonians living with hearing loss. And then we have community advocacy. And that's what many of you do. We work locally to expand communication access in public venues as required by the Americans with Disabilities Act. And this work has taken on a new urgency because of COVID-19. Our panel discussion about telehealth, telemedicine, and hearing loss is just one piece of this complex puzzle. So both types of advocacy offer a great opportunity to participate to whatever degree you would like to be involved. Options include everything from strategic planning to communications to simply contacting your elected representatives and local organizations. And I will say that it's really, truly through advocacy that we make significant strides. So we have a brief legislative update. So I'm going to start with our Senate Bill 5210. This law requires hearing health professionals to notify consumers about available hearing assistive technologies. And this law will help people with hearing loss choose hearing instrument features like telecoils and Bluetooth and enable them to participate more fully in their communities. We are currently working with the Speech and Hearing Board in defining requirements. The other three bills listed here were stalled in committee, and Cynthia Stewart indicated she expected these bills would be considered again in 2021. On final note, a big part of successful legislation and advocacy is collaboration. And HLAA works to build, maintain working relationships with several organizations and advocacy groups, including the Washington State Senior Lobby, the Office of Deaf and Hard of Hearing, Disabilities Rights Washington, and the Hearing Loss Resource Council, and many others. Collaboration is equally important to community-based advocacy. We work with city councils, the public library system, healthcare providers, and organizations and disability access groups. Some of you probably know we recently worked with Disabilities Rights Washington to develop and promote a local candidates forum. We submitted hearing loss related questions about COVID-19, insurance, free online captioning, employment, and educational accommodations. So next, moving forward, given the impact of COVID-19, we really want to focus on promoting communication access within healthcare settings. This might include training for healthcare workers, caring for people with hearing loss, especially those in intensive care or isolation and assisted living facilities, and educating administrators on the value of using clear masks and demonstrating the value of having hearing loops installed in specific areas and the value of using captioning apps in teleconference settings. So I've shared with you our thoughts about legislative and community advocacy efforts, but we would like to know what is most important to you. So you can pick any or all. Which advocacy efforts are most important to you? This one requires a little bit of thought, doesn't it? So what I would like you to do is to go ahead and vote. And then if you have topics that are important that aren't on this list, please let us know. Give us a note, leave us a message in the chat. So Tina, do you want to, can everyone see the results?
Yep.
Okay, so hearing access in healthcare seems to be taking the top priority, and that's something that we would like to focus on for you guys. So next we are talking about education. Education is another main priority for HLAA. Through our education efforts, HLAA seeks to give Washingtonians the confidence they need to manage their hearing loss. And an excellent example this year was our involvement with the consumer education brochure that supports the Senate Bill 5210. When this law was passed, it included that the Office of Deaf and Hard of Hearing must develop educational materials for consumers with hearing loss, explaining the available hearing assistive technology. We have been collaborating with ODHH through the Hearing Loss Resource Council and other stakeholders to create information on this brochure. The brochure is still currently being finalized, and when it's ready, we will provide information to you on distribution. We've also created a COVID-19 specific section on our website, and we provided access to multiple webinars, blogs, and articles through our e-news and social media. We are looking forward to continue to provide education to our members on how to stay connected and healthy. Our final area of support, whether it's coming to terms with new or increasing hearing loss, struggling to seek help, overcoming communication challenges with your partner, friends, or at work, or even with your family during the holidays. We are better when we share our stories. We are stronger as individuals and as a community. I would like to thank our panelists and our board members and others for sharing today your stories. We used to do this in person at our picnics and events and annual meeting. And for a while yet, we're going to need to do this virtually, but it's more important now than ever that we connect. And this brings us to our next poll question. If available, would you attend monthly virtual meetings to share and receive information about living with hearing loss? These would be hosted by HLAA Washington, and we would seek to strike a balance between time to share experiences and ask each other questions and to hear from experts like our panelists today.
There are your results, Sherry.
Okay, thank you very much. So it looks like a large number of you would be very interested in meeting virtually. So this is why we designed this meeting, is to get your input and to find out what's important to you. Other ideas are the virtual monthly meetings we discussed, and also having 2 all-member meetings a year instead of just the single one. This would mean we would likely get together again in May to discuss the results of the survey and to continue to get your input and hopefully inspire you to volunteer for specific programs. So first off, here's another poll question. Are you a member of HLAA? So thank you. As members of HLAA, you are automatically a member of HLAA Washington. There is no additional cost, and you have access to all the national and local resources. As a member of HLAA Washington, you can be connected to our community, serve as a volunteer, be nominated to the Board of Trustees, and help us advocate for a more inclusive Washington state. It's easy to become a member. just go to the HLAA website at hearingloss.org and click on Becoming a Member button in the upper right-hand corner of every page. We welcome volunteers to help us achieve our goals. One of the things that we are working on is strategic planning, always advocacy campaigns, virtual meetings and coordination, content development for information channels. If you have interest in any of these areas or any other areas that you could think that could benefit our members, please reach out to us. Email us at info@hearinglosswa.org and put volunteer in the subject line. And let's see. So I think that pretty much concludes our presentation of HLAA Washington and how we're working for you. And at this point, I'd like to turn it back over to Tina so that we could go ahead and ask for your questions now.
Okay, so I am going to start turning on the cameras of our panelists and asking them to unmute. All right. So Diana, you are next, and I'm going to spotlight you so people can see you. Okay.
Okay, I have a number of questions. First of all, I wanted to comment on the survey. I think it should also be sent out to people who used to be members of the Hearing Loss Association of Washington and dropped out within the last 2 or 3 years, because I think that would help to build up membership. Another thing that I would like Hearing Loss Association to continue to do, which they used to do in the past, was to make hospital kits. And what happens the last time I've looked, and I don't think things have changed since then, you just refer down to what the Oregon chapter is doing. That's not the same thing as the Hearing Loss Association making hearing kits, because hospital kits, because it both advertises the Hearing Loss Association of Washington and also helps people when they go to hospitals. A question that I have is the Over-the-Counter Hearing Act was passed 3 years ago. The regulations were required to be published in August. My understanding is they were not. What is the Hearing Loss Association of America doing to make those regulations get published?
Sherry, do you want to add anything, as we're both board members?
So
Yeah.
I've been chatting for the last half hour. I think folks would like to hear from you, Kelly.
Yeah, okay. What I can say is that that it is not a conversation that's brought to the table regularly, in part because there are no major updates that I'm aware of. That doesn't mean that HLA is not actively involved. So Barbara Kelly is front row and center and involved in any opportunity that is open for discussion. And my impression is the challenges of defining what is a hearing aid versus what is over-the-counter, amplification enhancement devices. And as you know, since 2017, there's been a surge of because hearing aids, as we've known it, has become re-regulated or deregulated, or whatever word you want to use. It hasn't stopped, and we see now so many options that come in different flavors, whether they're amplification apps, whether they're wearable devices that are now being advertised more in the health and fitness realm. And so I think the private sector and industries have moved so quickly that it's it's proposed a challenge as to come up with a definition of what is a traditional hearing aid, and therefore how to present that within the context of the FDA and in the context of traditional healthcare models. So I'm sure other people, Chad, Nicole, I'm thinking of the American Audiology position and then the otolaryngology organizations. Maybe you want to add more.
Can add. American Academy of Audiology and the Academy of Doctors of Audiology have both been watching the passing of this very closely. The main concern, like in our state, is that you have to have a hearing test, a diagnostic hearing test, in order to be fit with hearing aids. So if over-the-counter hearing aids are deemed hearing aids, then they must be the hearing test has to be completed first. And how does that then get translated to the over-the-counter seller? So that sort of has stalled things. As far as I know, it's sort of exactly what Kelly was saying. The P's and Q's, crossing the T's, dotting the I's, is where it's gotten stalled. We know we should be having over-the-counter hearing aids available, but how do we do it and still call it a hearing aid and abide by the state rules, state laws?
What I would tend to think is that the FDA, if they make a rule saying there has to be over-the-counter hearing aids without a test, I think probably the state cannot have something contrary.
Well, the state rules still override that. So for instance, right now, you do not have to, by FDA rules, you do not have to have medical clearance to purchase hearing aids. But in the state of Washington, you still need medical clearance in order to purchase hearing aids. So as an audiologist, I still have to abide by that rule. I still have to get medical clearance or a signed waiver before I fit hearing aids. So it's the same idea.
And I guess Kelly was talking about hearing aids for people with low income. I just wanted to mention something that passed the House of Representatives last year. And of course, it's now dead. The Senate wouldn't act on it. But everybody has been concerned about the price of medicine. And the House passed a bill which would have made the United States have to pay way less for medicine, and also individuals pay less for medicine. And in that bill said with the savings that they would have, they were going to cover hearing aids for people with not with the mild or moderate, but above that hearing loss. And they were going to be covering dentistry, and they were going to also be covering vision. So depending on what happens with these elections, maybe they'll introduce the same kind of building of legislation again. I'm not so optimistic of it passing, but I think it would be great if it did.
I'll also add that if you look in your chat box, Henry Wong provided a letter from two members of Congress who requested an update. This is just less than a month ago, exactly to our point, is what is the status of this? So if you go to your chat, you'll see that there's a PDF there that you can open and read. And given it was just a few weeks ago, my guess is there's been no updates given all that's going on in our nation's capital. But you're not the only one that's asking, Diana.
So that's great. And I think that there were a couple of questions in chat. I think Karen asked what is happening with patients who don't really have access to technology, I think.
Yeah, I find that with this COVID thing, that the technology for people with hearing loss has just absolutely mushroomed. I used to be fairly tech savvy, and I know I don't keep up with it all since I don't have a chapter right now, but I am finding people who wear hearing aids reluctant to look into anything further beyond their hearing aids. You know, there's wonderful apps for your phone that will do captioning, and I found a note thing, I forget the name of it, that, you know, gives little signs that you can use. But has anybody come up with an idea of how do we have that conversation, or open it up with someone who is a fairly low technology user? You know, I'm finding reluctance here, just like they didn't want to talk about hearing aids. And it's quite frustrating because there really is so much to offer out there.
So Chad just put a great link into the chat box that talks about Connect Here has a great link for helping people with technology. And I think really one of the best things that I found has been these smaller group meetings where you have someone like Tina who really understands the technology, and we have just a few people on the call, and we can go through and help people learn to use the platforms, the individual platforms. And I think, you know, many people, or most of our community, is more familiar with Zoom than they are some of the other platforms. And, you know, practice makes perfect, and it also helps give you a little bit more confidence. But I do really would like to applaud HLAA and the other organizations that are having these chapter meetings and encouraging people to become familiar with the technology and to learn to use maybe just one simple piece of technology at a time versus, you know, if you give me too much information, I'm overwhelmed and I'm confused. But if you give me just one thing to try at a time, I'm more likely to learn how to use that particular technology well. Tina?
So I put myself on screen because I just wanted to let you know that I have a list of videos that I'm going to be making, kind of addressing a lot of these issues. I know I tend to do kind of an information dump and then I run. It's kind of, I call it the knowledge drop. And I'm realizing that I need to make them a little bit more bite-sized. And so that is on my ever getting longer to-do list of things. So just know that, you know, I saw, Karen, that you just, you know, started looking at my blog a little bit. And, you know, I think some people know about some of my resources. And so I just wanted to let you know that this is something that I am working on as well. And yeah, and when it goes out, I will let y'all know.
Just want to say that as an audiologist, we have someone in practice to help. So we do have an audiology assistant. A lot of practices do, and the goal is to have someone to advocate for you. So if you, I would say reach out to your audiologist and see if they have any resources for you as well. If you don't feel comfortable with some of the apps that are connecting your hearing aids to your audiologist, all of the manufacturers have either a PDF that walks you through how to use the platform or a video that walks you through it. So, but use your audiologist as a resource also.
Okay, terrific. And I see, it looks like Chad has his hand up.
I have what is probably going to be a hot take, but I think it's advocacy organizations have been hesitant to endorse a product or something. And so a lot of the how-to guides tend to be much longer. And for medical professionals and for people like me, who mostly rely on my ears, it's really, really difficult to navigate this. So I think there needs to be very short how-to guides for people, for nurses in the hospital or something. They don't have time to look through a 10-minute thing and evaluate all the options. We just need something to know right now that works. So I think that's one of the things limiting going forward. And I've only briefly gone over the connecthere.com website that I put in the chat box, but I think that it is excellent resource for this, and I strongly encourage people to connect to it.
Great, thank you. So we are running out of time, and I would just really like to thank our panelists again. This has just been fabulous. And Tina, you've done a great job of moderating the conversation. And on behalf of HLAA Washington, I would just like to say we are all very grateful for the time that you've given to us today and for your wisdom and your expertise. Before we move on to the social time, I would just like to encourage everyone who's on the call to talk about, your hearing loss, to share information about HLAA, and to share our e-news, pass it along to someone else who doesn't have it, forward it along, and feel free to welcome to reach out to us. Tina, you want to say something, I could tell.
Yeah, so I was going to say, so for all three of our panelists, they all have wonderful resources. And so where is the best place for the participants on this call to access? Do you guys want to put up your websites or any of the resources that you have? Because I know that you all have wonderful things to share with the membership here. So I wanted to make sure that you had an opportunity to share that information.
That's great, Tina. And I will say, in this version of the e-news that we just sent to everyone, people can click on Kelly's name, Nicole's name, and Chad's name, and that will take you guys directly to the website as well, to their websites.
And can I make a suggestion? If you want to save the chat, because there's a lot of resources in it, you just go to the bottom right corner where the three dots are, click on it, and there'll be an option to save chat. And I did list that in the chat. Okay.
Thank you, Carolyn. That's great.
And also this session is recorded, and also recorded is the chat. So that information will be on there as well. Sherry, how would you like to handle, do you want everyone to turn on their camera or go back to like raising their hand or asking in the chat box? How do you want people to share?
So that would be great if everyone could turn their camera back on, and we could try to have a little virtual check in with everyone and see how everyone is doing. That would be great.
You see Mr. Collison, the treasurer, would like to say something. So Bill, go ahead.
Okay. There's two things come to mind. First, I'd like to see a threshold for transitioning from over-the-counter hearing aids to really seeing an audiologist in terms of they may need more help or have an audiologist help to determine that. Okay. The second item would be to have an online version similar to what we had before in Washington for those either in the hospital or going to the hospital that have hearing loss difficulties.
Does anyone have any anything to share? Good news on hearing loss advocacy? Any new hearing loops or speech transfer systems?
To hear from Diana about her testimony that she gave yesterday. I thought she did a great job. And if she wanted to talk about what she said yesterday during the Department of Health and Hearing and Speech Board meeting, as I put her on the spot.
That is a great idea. So yesterday, for those of you who don't know, there was a public hearing on the regulations for ESB 5210. And since I had a HLAA national board meeting at the same time, Diana was great to represent HLAA Washington at this meeting.
The Hearing Loss Association of Washington submitted to the Board of Hearing and Speech are some changes that we wanted to make in the proposed regulations. And the regulations were needed because of the statute that was passed, I believe, in 2019 that required hearing professionals to tell people about hearing assisted technology. And so essentially what I said was a summary of what we had sent in writing. Okay, they had a definition in there of hearing assisted technologies, which we suggested a change because we wanted to include Bluetooth, but the definition that was proposed initially was only covering assisted listening systems or a device. Then there was an area where we made, okay, it's hard, if you haven't looked at the regulations, it's hard to understand them, but that was one change that we suggested. The statute which deals with audiologists talks about hearing instruments, not hearing aids. So we suggested that the term instrument be used so it's consistent. Then there was a sentence that had been in the proposed regulations that was sort of interesting. Sherry thought it said nothing. I spent about 30 minutes arguing with my husband how to revise the sentence so it said something. And so then we finally did agree on it, and this is what we presented to the Board of Hearing and Speech in the document that I sent in. It says hearing assisted technology options can enable hearing instruments to connect with phones, computers, electronic sound sources, and assisted listening systems, including the assisted listening systems compliant with the American Disabilities Act. And that is really important. These regulations are really important because the purchasers are told about because of the regulations and the statutes, are going to be told about this additional devices which are going to help your hearing aids expand your life and enable you to be listening and understanding in different places. And then finally, I guess I'm going to read a sentence that comes out of the proposed regulations, which we had no problem with, and we're really happy that it is in the proposed regulations. Is prior to initial fitting and purchase, you must be informed both orally and in writing about the uses, benefits, and limitations of current hearing assistive technology. And so that is, you're told about that. But the way the proposed regulations are drafted, they don't say what they're really saying here is this is what your audiologist or hearing aid specialist must tell you, but they're not, but there's no proof that they actually have told you that. And so that we recommended that that some additional wording be added so that people said that people not only knew that they were supposed to be informed about this, but they say that they were informed about this. And this makes a big difference in terms of telecoils.
I thought about that.
And so that's why we wanted it very clear that they had been told about these things. So that was essentially what I presented at the beginning. Later, I touched on something because we have passed the statute that requires telling purchasers about hearing assisted technology before they make the purchase. I think it should, the regulations which say what should be, what they need, what hearing aid specialists need to be taught, this should be included in that they need to be taught about Bluetooth.
Oh, you should have done this yesterday.
And so that's what I hope in the future the Board of Hearing and Speech will adopt. And Nicole, I didn't look thoroughly at the regulations. Maybe that we will recommend that it be included in what must be in courses for audiologists as well.
Are there any last questions or comments?
The only thing I'll say about this.
Any last sage words, Sherry?
Again, I would like to thank everyone for taking their time to join our meeting today. It was so wonderful to see each of you, to feel like we're connected and our community is together. I'm hoping that we can move forward to sharing and connecting and sharing each other's stories as we move through this difficult time. So again, just thanks once again, and share information about HLAA and in hearing loss e-news, because every time you speak up for yourself, you help someone else who's coming along behind you. So be the voice, and you be the voice for everyone else. So thanks again for your participation today.
Sherry, can I ask you an additional question?
Sure, Diana.
Okay. I mean, when Governor Inslee, I used to attend some of his press conferences. I haven't recently, but they have somebody that signs, but they don't have any captions.
That's right.
I mean, can at this time the Hearing Loss Association of Washington do anything?
If we work collectively to get our voice heard, we're hopefully will be able to have captions next year. I will say that that's one thing about the pandemic. We have been communicating with TBW since 2014 and requesting captions. I've given them all kinds of resources and suggestions of how they could implement captions, but it has not been a priority for TBW. However, because of COVID and the recent demand for captions, because Governor Inslee has not been captioning his press conferences, they have been inundated with requests for captioning. So I'm hoping in this next 21 session that we will actually have captions upon request. So just keep plugging away. We'll put information on our website for people that you can contact to request captioning. But they claim they're working on it. That's all I can say. Thank you.
I just have one other suggestion, and the more the merrier. Governor Inslee puts together his budget in December. And I think it would be useful for the Hearing Loss Association of Washington to write a letter about that. Is it going to do anything? It can't hurt, and I think it's important to do so.
That's a great suggestion, Diana, and we'll follow through on that. So thanks again, everyone. And you can contact me by email at any time. Okay, thanks.